Okay, are you ready for a little virus 101? You know, I find that during this COVID-19, there's so much misinformation out there, and I'm very cautious about even what I read when it comes to the research out there, because a lot of it is misrepresented, and the good research, it sometimes can be very difficult to find. So I only use a couple of websites. The National Institute of Health is one of them. They have a lot of research papers that have been vetted by their peers, and there's a lot of older research on it, so that's a really good resource. So I've been reading a little bit about the virus, and I think the biggest thing that we need to know is we trust God's wisdom first, and He wants us to be aware and awake and have discernment, and that's going to come from Him first. And then we have to pick and choose what we really need to know. I mean, do we really need to know all this stuff that's out there? Do we really need to fill our minds with, you know, I mean, there's a lot out there. And I find that a lot of people are still tuning in way too much to YouTube and Facebook and reading way too much. And, you know, there's a psychological effect on our minds when we do that. And that's what Satan wants to do. He wants to inundate us with as much information as we can. And he'll use 99.9% of the truth, and then he will poison it with a little drop. And there lies the problem. That little drop of poison poisons the whole lot. So we really have to be careful with the information and how much we're getting in daily. You know, if you have that much time to spend on the internet looking up things about the COVID-19, then are you spending that much time in the Bible too? Are you learning who Jesus is? Are you reading the prophecy and what we are to, you know, because prophecy is going to be our biggest comfort during this time. And if you're not reading that and you're spending more time on the computer, reading things that are not biblical, then you're really not feeding yourself. What you're doing is poisoning yourself. You know, God wants us to have discernment and wisdom, but our bulk of our time should be in God's Word. So anyway, I'm going to just start with the basic foundation. If we remember what viruses are, they're basically parasites, and what they do is they hijack cells, and they do this by either, you know, our cells have a membrane. It's a phospholipid membrane. It's very beautiful, and it's got proteins on it, and those proteins have like little receptors. Now, what happens with the COVID-19 is that when it enters our body, it's looking for a receptor to bind to. And as I said in one of my other videos, it actually binds to the ACE2 receptor. And that opens up the cell, and it gets in and it replicates. And now, it also needs a host cell, though, and that's where serine protease comes in. And during the Middle Eastern SARS virus, they made that connection because people were getting GI symptoms, and they found that the serine protease, which was in the gut, it was actually replicating, and it spread that virus. And viruses, like I said, they hijack and they replicate, and they could just cause havoc in the body, and that's exactly what the SARS was doing with the Middle Eastern virus. So they have made that connection, and they also found that people who were on Prevacid and Prilosec and protein pump inhibitors, they actually responded very well with those medications because it inhibited that union. And now the other thing is they found that if you were on an ACE inhibitor, which increases the amount of receptors on your cells for ACE2, it actually made the condition worse because now you have more receptors for the virus to bind to. Now, this is just the research. I'm not telling you what medications to be on or not be on. I'm just saying this was the research. So with that said, now we have something very interesting happening in this whole virus landscape. Now, as this virus develops, more research is coming out, and they're finding out more and more things, and they're seeing some odd things. People like dropping dead, like, you know, they go in, they get their blood pressure and their temperature, and everything is stable, and then they're dead. They're also finding out that vents aren't the answer anymore. And why is that? So from what I've seen in the research, they are now discovering that this particular virus it's not just the ACE2 inhibitors that it's binding to that is really the root cause of people dying or them getting very, very sick very quickly in some patients. What they are finding out is that this virus is causing a cytokine storm. And if you know anything about the immune system is awesome. God set it up so great. You know, we have an antigen comes in, and our first line of defense on the front line is the neutrophils. And the neutrophils are many. There's thousands and thousands of neutrophils. And what they do is they have a phagocytotic a type of reaction. They eat things, eat. So they go out and they start eating all the antigens. They eat the bacteria or they eat the virus. And now with this virus, because it's eliciting such an over the top immune response, it is actually decreasing the neutrophil count. And it's doing something very unique also. It is stealing, it's robbing the iron from the erythrocyte, the red blood cell, the heme part of the red blood cell. So if you look at a red blood cell, I don't know if you can see this. This is kind of my scribble. Now, this is a red blood cell, and it's got a heme and a globin. So the heme part of the red blood cell is the iron part, and the globin part is the protein part, and it's got like, they bind together, and you know, this is what makes a hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin is this red blood cell has a very specific purpose. It doesn't even have a nucleus. Its only purpose is to carry our oxygen in our body. It only lives for 120 days and then it's dead, right? So what this virus does is it's stealing the heme, the iron part of our red blood cell. And that's a problem because we can't put people in vents because it's not a problem like they have pneumonia. In pneumonia, we have what's called this is the alveolar in our lungs. Our lungs, we breathe in, we go through the bronchioles, and then in the very depths of our lungs is called the alveolar. They're little sacs in our lungs that are there for gas exchange. The oxygen breathes in, the CO2 come out. We've got a very thin semi-permeable membrane in our alveola. Our capillaries are breathing, you know, we breathe in O2, so it's when we breathe it in, it goes down deep into our alveolars through, you know, it's being carried by the blood, and the capillaries are surrounding the alveola, and then there's a gas exchange. So that gas exchange, it's real simple. The oxygen goes in to the alveolar, fills up our sacs, and then what comes out is CO2, and then we breathe out CO2. Now with pneumonia, the alveolar gets plugged. It gets plugged. Okay, and then people can't breathe, and so that's where they start doing ventilators, and they intubate people. Now the problem again with this virus is they're finding out that it's not so much a problem with the gas exchange, although I'm sure that's going on. But we have another problem now. We have a cytokine storm, which is an over-the-top immune response, where the neutrophils are decreasing. We've got stolen iron, so we don't have any oxygen carrying capacity, so these people are having problems with their oxygen levels. And when they do their labs, they actually have an increase in is that these patients who are having, you know, are very, very sick, or some of them die, they are finding out that their C-reactive protein is being elevated, their albumin is being elevated, their iron levels are low, their neutrophils are low. C-reactive protein is measures inflammation. Our SED rate measures inflammation, that's elevated. Virus is invading. It seems to be eliciting a over-the-top immune response, which is now affecting people in a very serious manner. It's not just like the flu where you're getting pneumonia. And pneumonia, trust me, friends, the flu deaths are still higher than COVID. So let's keep that in the back of your mind. It's still higher than COVID. The flu is... All right, so I know that was a lot of information, and I don't want to go down any rabbit holes because every time someone sends me information, I do carefully take some time to look at it, and I really thank everybody for sending me what they have. And I pray. I mean, I pray over it, and I just ask the Lord, is this something that I really need to know? And that's what you guys need to do too. But one of my main concerns is it seems like there is fundamental treatment for the virus, and that's why this push for a vaccine isn't making any sense. Because from what I read from the National Institute Health research many years ago, when they had the Middle East SARS virus, they hit the wall with the vaccines, and in fact they were injecting one of their vaccines into rabbits, and it elicited a horrible immune response, and it actually destroyed the rabbit's immune system. So, you know, a vaccine is not just around the corner. It is not something that's going, I mean, people need to get out of their head about this vaccine and this Bill Gates and all this money, and they're looking at the wrong place. We already have viable options with treating this virus, and it, you know, the thing with this virus, I don't know if it is just part of, you know, the coronavirus that's been floating around for quite a long time. People already have built up immunity to the coronavirus, because if you've been subjected to the flu, you probably have been subjected to corona in the past. So there's more people out there who actually have antibodies for the coronavirus, because it's been around. In fact, when they were talking about Italy, they had a vaccine for the people in Italy, and they actually, it was a new super vaccine, I believe, last year that they implemented during flu season, and they think that may have been the problem why they saw such a spike in the virus this year, is because they used the H1N1, and I think they used some components of the coronavirus. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is why they had this massive epidemic in their country. And we didn't see it here. Now, with that said, I've read only a little bit, and I've got a little article right here about Fauci. And I don't know, is he a bad guy, good guy? I don't know. But I know when they just interviewed him, and this was in U.S. News, and this is a direct quote on him. It says, based on data from China, Fauci said that about 80% of people who get infected do really quite well and recover without any medical treatment. But about 10 to 15% get seriously ill, particularly those in high-risk groups, such as the elderly or patients with other medical problems. While a treatment may be identified in a matter of months, Fauci said a vaccine would take at least a year to a year and a half. Now, this was just posted on, let's see, he talked about this in March. Okay, so now we're in April. Now, I don't know if Fauci has changed his mind about a vaccine. If he has, then the guy is a liar because this is what he was saying back in March, that a vaccine is not around the corner and that most people can get over this. So I'm hoping Fauci, what he was saying back in March, is really holding up to now in April and going into May. It says testing for a vaccine has to proceed in stages to make sure it's safe to use on people and that it works. Well, I also hope he hasn't abandoned that idea about it being safe. And that's why what I'm saying is, I'm sorry about the rain, we have something that works right now with the symptoms that we're looking at, and it's the chloroquine. So why would we not be using that? That's what I'm saying. So anyway, just remember that Satan will take 99.9% of the truth, and he will taint it with a very small fraction of a lie, and it's all polluted then. It pollutes everything. And that is what's happening with our news sources, and that's what's happening with this whole virus thing and the government. All it takes is a little bit to pollute all of it. So be very, very careful with what you're going to fill your mind with. Remember, we fill our minds first with Christ, and then after that, he will give us discernment and wisdom to show us what we really need to know. And ask yourself, do you really need to know more in-depth things about this virus to really be up to date, to really protect yourself, to really prepare yourself? Because the only preparation that you need right now is for the coming of Christ. That's what you need. And we all know what that looks like. We need to be getting our spiritual life in order, our homes in order. We need to get prepared for things to get worse. We need to physically prepare ourselves. We have the answers, right? And it's not found on YouTube and Facebook and trying to dive into these rabbit holes that are taking our eyes off of Christ. How much time are you spending on all of that, and how much time are you spending on God's Word? Be honest, because that's where your allegiance is going to lie. What kingdom are you living in? All right, love you guys.